and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Thailand's suspended Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra is now facing an anti-graft probe over alleged ethics violations linked to the earlier leaked phone call with Cambodia's former leader Hun Sen. According to local media, the 38-year-old already suspended by the Constitutional Court now faces mounting pressure. India's Foreign Minister Subrahmanyam Jaishankar has told Chinese counterpart Wang Yi that resolving border friction and maintaining peace are crucial for mutual trust between India and China, according to media reports, while he also said both countries have made good progress in normalizing ties over the past 9 months. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met with US Special Envoy Keith Kellogg in Kyiv to discuss strengthening the air defenses and weapons procurement with European support. According to media reports, the talks came a day after President Donald Trump promised Patriot missiles for Ukraine. Nearly two-thirds of lawyers in the US Justice Department's federal programs branch have quit since President Trump's election win, straining the unit defending his key policies, according to media reports. Out of 110 attorneys, 69 have resigned or announced plans to leave amid intense legal challenges. The G20's financial stability watchdog has released a new plan on Monday to tackle climate risks, but paused further policy work as the US pulls back. Washington's exit from key groups studying climate impacts on financial stability has tested global unity on climate-related policy. Air India CEO Campbell Wilson has urged staff not to draw premature conclusions about last month's deadly clash in Ahmedabad. His memo followed a preliminary report detailing cockpit confusion and fuel switches being flipped before the Boeing Dreamliner went down, killing 260 people. President Donald Trump has pledged to send Patriot missiles and possibly offensive weapons to Ukraine in a major policy shift, while Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky nominated Yulia Sviridenko as the new prime minister in a government shakeup, according to media reports. Nigeria's former president Muhammadu Buhari, who died in London at aged 82, will be buried tomorrow in his home state of Katsina, according to media reports. Buhari, a former military ruler, made history by winning the presidency in 2015 and 2019. Now, Indian Prime Minister Modi has praised his legacy and India-Nigeria ties. The European Commission has said that it was putting forward a new list of US goods worth $84 billion that could be targeted by EU levies if tariff talks with Washington fail. The bloc's Trade Chief Commissioner Markus Sefcovic announced the proposal, accounting for some 72 billion euros worth of US imports at a meeting with EU ministers in Brussels. This move comes after US President Donald Trump threw months of painstaking negotiations with the EU into disarray by threatening to impose tariffs of 30% on the bloc's goods if there is no deal by August 1st. The EU trade ministers agreed that they were still keen to secure an agreement with Washington before that deadline to head off the damaging duties. EU trade ministers agreed that they were still keen to secure an agreement with Washington before that deadline to head off the damaging duties. The EU has already prepared a separate list of US imports worth 21 billion euros that it is ready to target over earlier tariffs from Trump on steel and aluminum. However, the bloc has announced that it would further hold off putting that list into force as it searches for a deal with the United States by August. Now we are joined by Peter Cordillo. He's a chief market economist at Spartan Capital Securities, joining us live from New York. Thank you, Peter, for joining us today. Good to see you. Given the EU's threat to impose levies on $84 billion worth of U.S. goods. How do you expect this escalating trade tension to impact global markets, particularly equity commodity sectors?
Well, I think if I heard the answer correctly, I think that the Fed stays pat until September, until they get a clearer picture in terms of the final decisions on tariffs and what may not be the impact of the inflationary aspect of this trade war. So I think in terms of the markets, I think they stay pretty much stable. In terms of commodity, of course, we'll continue to see volatility. But in terms of equities, I think the earnings season is going to be supportive. It'll be some sort of a cushion for the trade versus the tariffs. When I say that, I mean that we'll probably get respectable quarterly results that will most likely justify the high valuations.
And Peter, from an investor's standpoint, how should markets interpret the EU's decision to delay enforcing existing tariffs? Does it signal confidence in the resolution?
Well, I think investors in the market in general right now are not really taking to heart the letters that went out to various nations regarding what their tariffs will be on August the 1st. I think the market is basically saying these are just negotiating points and they're not going to be as steep as the administration would like them to be. And at the end, I think there'll still be inflationary worries about it. And somehow or another, we'll get a little bit more higher inflation, but I don't think that it'll be inflation that's going to cause the Fed to stay on hold for the remainder of the year. So I kind of think that the markets are acting accordingly and are looking forward at this time.
And according to you, is the European Union's proposed 84 billion retaliatory tariff list a strategic bargaining tool or a step towards trade war, according to you?
Yeah, well, look, I think I've said this before on your program, that tariffs, nobody wins in a tariff war. And I think everyone realizes that. And I think President Trump realizes that. So, yeah, it could go on for a little bit more, but at the end, I think things will smooth out some way or another. It would be very detrimental if this trade war would continue for a long time. Not only would you have inflation and an inflationary impact, but you would certainly have negative economic activity, which means that the global economy would probably be in a recession. So I think that, hopefully by the fall, this trade war will be, I don't want to say totally behind us, but certainly not as vivid and present as it is now.
And Peter, now looking at a 30% tariffs threat from President Trump, how realistic is a last-minute deal between Brussels and Washington?
Could you repeat that, please?
So how realistic is it that the EU and US can reach a trade deal between the upcoming August 1st deadline? Could you hear me? Let me repeat it. So I asked, how realistic is a last-minute trade deal between EU and Washington?
Well, I think it'll happen. Certainly, the letter indicated that it's going to be 30% on the EU and Mexico. I don't think it's going to get to that. I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see it close to maybe 5 or 6%, which probably can be doable in terms of an agreement.
Thank you very much, Peter Cordillo, for joining us and sharing your insight as Chief Market Economist at Spartan Capital Securities. Now we move on to our next news. Germany has expressed support for EU-led negotiations on the possible sale of US-made Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine, while seeking to avoid escalation with Washington until at least August 1st. German government spokesperson Stefan Cornelius has said Chancellor Friedrich Merz is working to avoid tariff disputes while pushing for a deal with the US. Let's listen in to the German spokesperson.
Durchaus positive Signale auch von unseren US-Partnern, was das Thema Luftverteidigungssysteme angeht, was das Thema Patriot angeht. Bundesminister Pistorius ist gerade auf dem Weg, gerade im Flugzeug auf dem Weg nach Washington und wird diese Gespräche, diese Abstimmung.
Zwei auch vom Bundeskanzler erbeten worden in dem Telefonat, und der Bundeskanzler hat ja am Freitag noch mal mit dem amerikanischen Präsidenten telefoniert, und im Laufe dieser Gespräche hat sich dann, die sicher über jetzt mehr einer Woche hinzogen, die Zahl erhöht. Jetzt sind wir nach amerikanischer Sicht auf mehr als 2 Systemen, und der Bedarf der Ukraine ist, wie Sie richtig sagen, höher.
Meanwhile, the US has signaled its intent to sell Patriot systems to Kyiv, with President Donald Trump confirming the move as business and promoting Ukraine's very sophisticated military hardware. Trump claimed the weapons would be paid for 100% likely through European funding. Defense Minister Boris Pistorius is in Washington for final talks, while Germany prepares to expand its own Patriot capabilities on the ground in Ukraine. The need for these systems is clear, as drones and missile attacks continue to batter civilian areas in Ukraine. Now we are joined by Eric Walberg. He's a political analyst joining us live from Toronto. Thank you, Eric, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. How does Germany's support for EU-led talks on supplying the Patriot systems to Ukraine reflect its broader strategy of balancing maybe transatlantic unity with the need to avoid escalating trade tensions with Washington?
Oh, yes, it's in a bit of a dilemma. It wants to keep trade with the U.S. going, and it also wants to pursue this policy of really war against Russia, at which Trump came into power. He said he would end the war in 1 day, which clearly meant that there would be no further support for Ukraine by NATO, that Ukraine would be on its own, and it would have to resolve its difficulties with Russia as a bilateral agreement. This seemed to be the intent, and he backed off that over the last 6 months. He started there, and he just backed right back into the Biden position of providing as much military support for Ukraine and with the idea of defeating Russia. So this is now Germany's policy, and it really it can only lead to further war, further destruction. And so I really see that this attempt by the EU to take over from the US and to pursue this war against Russia, that this is really going to just undermine both the EU and the US policies. And if you notice how Trump dresses up his Patriot missiles, he said, this will all be 100% paid for. This is just good business. That's all it is. We just want to promote business. Well, but if your business is producing war, then really that's your business. And it's not just a question of profit and loss. It's a question of world security, world war. So I think this is a very negative policy on the part of Trump, and he is about to announce tonight he is announcing some huge new news. Well, his news will be that we're going to attack Russia. Basically, that's his news, that we're on board with the EU and we're going to try and get regime change in Russia. So it's a very bleak day, in my opinion, about what's happening in the world.
And Andrew, now, how might Germany's role in this negotiation shape broader EU-US relations, particularly in the context of maybe defense cooperation and looming trade disputes?
Are you addressing me?
Eric, sorry, I'm sorry.
Eric, okay.
Yes.
Right.
Eric.
Oh, you're still, you have, I thought you were giving the other panelists. Well, in terms of US-German relations, I guess this is a good sign, although you can't really, from one day to the next, Trump changes his opinion. So one day he might be all friends with Germany, and the next day he would be bad-mouthing. So I really don't put much value on trying to cozy up to Trump because it usually will backfire. What you have to do is just have a principled policy, and Germany's policy should be one of promoting peace in Europe, not promoting war. So I think that it's a very negative position that Germany's taking, and it will only result in further escalation and further destruction and further deaths. So whether or not the US is on board with this, it's in principle a very bad position.
And Eric, now what does this reveal about the broader geopolitical strategy of the EU?
Well, the EU is the remnants of the imperial powers, England, France, Holland. Germany wasn't so, it had a few colonies, but but generally these are the imperial powers, and they are long, really irrelevant. They're weak economically, they're weak politically. And this idea of the European Union is a farce. There's no unity. There is just discord, and there's a great deal of corruption now. The latest is trying to overthrow the head of the EU Commission, van der Leyen, for her corruption. And it's so bureaucratic that they can't get rid of her. So the EU is in a very weak position. And by pursuing this policy of trying to defeat Russia, its inflation has gone up. It's lost all its cheap oil and gas coming from Russia. It's basically writing its own death warrant. So I think the only future of the EU with its present policy direction is downhill. I really feel very sorry for the EU for what it's doing to itself, shooting itself in the foot, basically.
Thank you very much, Eric Walberg, for joining us and sharing your insight as a political analyst. Now we move on to our next news. India's External Affairs Minister, DRS Jaishankar, currently is in Beijing. He held extensive talks with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, marking a renewed push in strengthening India-China ties. Jaishankar said the two sides have made good progress in normalizing relations over the past 9 months. Wang Yi, a flurry of statements, said China is willing to safeguard the multilateral trading system and stabilize global supply chains with India. He stressed China's readiness to enhance communication, build political mutual trust, and handle differences properly. The foreign minister repeatedly called for trust over suspicion and cooperation over competition. Beijing also called for long-term strategic planning centered in good neighboring, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation. He added that the momentum of improvement has not come easily and deserves to be cherished, highlighting the importance of staying the course. Jaishankar and Wang agreed to keep diplomatic channels open to resolve differences and focus on regional stability. Now we're joined by Andrew K.P. Long. He's a China strategist joining us live from London. Pardon about the earlier confusion. Thank you for joining us today. How should we interrupt China's emphasis on trust over suspicion and win-win cooperation in this context between India and China?
This is very much Beijing's hymn book that the Foreign Minister is singing from, departing from the decades-old confrontation against China. Agree to the suspicion, but the confrontation, of course, remains, and a rivalry especially. But I think that the world is now transiting to a stage where one size fits all no longer works, and then in cooperation, in competition, there could be cooperation, and even in rivalry, there could be partnership. So the foreign ministers is basically singing from China's hymn book, as I said. Because the border disputes have been there for a long time, and are likely to remain. So I think both sides can agree to disagree and set aside the differences. Not that they would concede on either side, but then setting aside the differences would open up opportunities for trust building, for projects with common interests like energy, security, like AI, and also developing the connectivity, water, climate change. So all these are very useful platforms and areas for both sides to cooperate on.
And Andrew, given the complex history between India and China, especially along the disputed border, what concrete signals should we look for to assess whether this diplomatic momentum is sustainable and, in Jaishankar's words, good relations?
As I said, I mean, the border disputes have been there for a long time, and it's a legacy of history, a legacy of British India, which redefined the borders by military dominance, which China, of course, did not accept. But that is history, and there's unlikely to change because it's already become part of the reality on the ground. For example, the Arunachal Pradesh, which China deemed part of Tibet, or Southern Tibet, is now part of the Indian jurisdiction. And of course, a lot of the borders, even they remain unclear, both sides trying to hold on their line of actual control. And then just by trumping the other side is unlikely to change the situation on the ground. I think what happens is that when the border clashes escalated to a very high level, both leaders realize that then both countries cannot afford a war because both countries are nuclear powered, and then instructions were clearly given down the line to scale down the confrontation. But I think that the lesson to be learned is that if you leave everything to the commanders on the field, whether it's on Indian side or China side, because the Indian military or the Chinese military have got no authority to negotiate. I mean, territorial sovereignty is non-negotiable. And both sides would try to push the envelope, and that led to a series of confrontations. And I think that with the leaders on both sides directed to scale down the rhetoric and to seek areas of cooperation, that's also is a very important agenda. But the most important thing is to instill measures whereby any kind of border conflict should be elevated up the line very quickly to get a direction from the very top, so as to prevent things from getting out of control if everything were left to the field commanders on either side.
And now China has spoken of stabilizing and keeping a stable relationship with India. How realistic is such economic cooperation, and what does it reveal about Beijing's broader regional strategy?
This is realistic when the whole world order has now been upended by Trump 2.0, throwing the rule-based international order, rules largely observed and followed by most of the world, liberal free trade, and then rules defining sovereignty, rules defining various rights. So these rules have been followed under the umbrella of the World Trade Organization and other international institutions, including the United Nations. But these rules have now been thrown out of the window, replaced by rules of the jungle of President Trump's American First hegemony, lumping huge tariffs not only on its perceived rivalry, China, but on Americans' allies in Europe and in other countries. The idea is that all countries, left, right, and center, should bend to Americans' will. Now, this is unlikely to end well because it's going to disrupt the global supply and value chain, which have now become very much integrated. Everything's now connected, especially China is embedded in almost everything, even though products not marked made in China. China's embedded in it in terms of rare earths, minerals, parts and components, and also logistics. The world's top 7 container ports out of top 11 are located in China. So disrupting the global supply and value chain, and then bullying allies and its adversary alike, including China and Russia, is unlikely to end well. And then I think history offers a very good lesson. For example, the Second World War, when Japan and Germany were trying to bully other countries and use this hegemonic power to control the rest of the world. Now that did not end well. Of course, we're not talking about a kinetic war, but then it's no less disruptive what the Trump 2.0 is doing. And I think that both India and China are learning lessons from history and then from the current situation when the whole world order is now thrown out of the window, and are seeking areas for cooperation to counterbalance all these disruptions.
Please, Andrew, stay with us as we stay in the region. China has called on Japan to reflect on its history and act with caution in security matters. As this year marks the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II and the Chinese people's war of resistance against Japanese aggression. Defense Ministry spokesman Jiang Bin made the comments today in response to reports that Japan may export 6 Abukuma-class warships to the Philippines. Jiang said defense cooperation should not target or harm third parties, reminding Japan of its militaristic past during World War II, including occupation of Chinese territory and aggression against neighbors like the Philippines. Let's listen in to the statement.
主张有关国家间的防务安全合作不应针对第三方或损害第三方利益。二战期间，日本军国主义对包括中国、菲律宾在内的周边国家进行侵略和殖民统治，侵占南海诸岛，负有严重历史罪责。近年来，日方突破和平宪法和专守防卫原则，不断对外输出武器装备，妄图拉小圈子搅局南海，给亚太地区制造不稳定因素。今年是中国人民抗日战争暨世界反法西斯战争胜利80周年，我们敦促日方深刻反省， 汲取历史教训，在军事安全领域谨言慎行，多做有利于维护地区和平。
Now we're joined by Andrew K.P. Long. He's a China strategist. Thank you, Andrew, for staying with us. How did China's historical references to World War II shape its current security posture in the region, particularly in response to Japan's growing defense partnership, like the proposed warship deal with the Philippines and recent military drill?
The recent military deal with the Philippines has been brokered in a way, or supported at least, by the United States, using both Japan and Philippines and South Korea to form a kind of loose military alliance to contain China, to double down on the first island chain with American military assets centered in Okinawa, the second island chain centered in Guam, together with the AUKUS, Australian, UK, and United States nuclear submarine deal on the south side of the Asia Pacific. Again, forming a tightly knit China containment policy. But the reference to the Second World War is also particularly relevant in the sense that the history of the Second World War bears witness to a kind of disastrous consequences for countries trying to impose its will on the rest of the world using military and other coercive means. And this is a reference to what President Trump is doing, lumping tariffs left, right, and center, not only on China as a perceived primary rival, but also on allies across the Atlantic, but also in Asia and other countries, and trying to make an economic war or tariff war against the rest of the world. And this is like the Second World War, is unlikely to end well. And of course, Japan is no longer its former self. Its economy is much smaller. Its military has been constrained. It's unlikely to pose any particular threat. But then on the other hand, if Japan goes nuclear, well, that would be a very, very serious repercussions in the region. So I think this warning is timely, borrowing lessons from the Second World War, a warning against Japan, a kind of military maneuvers, against history, a warning, a quiet, a hidden warning to the United States as well. And I think in a world where everything is now much more interconnected, there is more room for a cooperation, together with rivalry, if you like, together with even confrontation. The whole thing do not need to end to war or to lead to a fight. And then all sides should seek to ferret out opportunities which can benefit both sides and to resolve the differences through negotiations.
And Andrew, now to what extent is China's criticism of Japan's defense export plans is it driven by strategic concerns over encirclement or US-aligned coalitions in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, it's driven by all of these, especially because the tariff war, of course, is up close and personal, as the military exercises between Japan and the Philippines and South Korea, as I said, also with the AUKUS, Australian, Japan, United States, nuclear submarine deal, and the Quad, for example, including India and Australia, Japan, and United States. So all these are very up close and personal along China's borders. And of course, China wants to maintain peace in these important waterways, because China's conduit for trade and importation of goods and materials depend on it. It's China's lifeblood, even though China has pivoted to Central Asia and Europe through the China's Belt and Road initiative over land. But still, the sea lane of communication is extremely important to China's economy and to China's economic well-being. Hence, this warning and reference to the Second World War and also highlighting the importance of settling disputes through negotiation and seeking areas of cooperation which could benefit both sides.
Thank you very much, Andrew K.P. Long, for joining us today and sharing your insight as a China strategist throughout our news. Now we move on to our next news. China and the European Union held their 6th high-level environment and climate dialogue in Beijing today, marking a significant step in their green partnership. Chinese Vice Premier Ding Xuxiang and European Commission Executive Vice President Teresa Ribera led the talks, stressing a shared commitment to global climate governance. Ding reaffirmed China's determination to promote green and low-carbon development despite global uncertainties. He called for deeper cooperation in energy, circular economy, and climate support for developing countries. He said China and the EU must lead in building a fair, equitable climate governance system. Ribera praised the dialogue as a chance to build on 50 years of EU-China relations and pledged stronger joint action to implement the Paris Agreement. She stressed that multilateralism and bold climate leadership are needed to combat environmental challenges. Both sides reviewed progress since their last meeting in 2024 and agreed to expand dialogue and coordination going forward. Now we have a breaking news. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has confirmed that Mexico is prepared with its own plan to respond to U.S. tariff threats. As tensions escalate ahead of the August 1st deadline set by U.S. President Donald Trump, Sheinbaum expressed hope that an agreement could be reached before then, and she said she would be meeting on Monday with her foreign affairs team, which recently held talks in Washington. She also stressed that Mexico has already done its part in the fight against fentanyl trafficking and urged the U.S. to step up its efforts. Now we're joined by Peter Cordillo. He's a chief market economist at Spartan Capital Securities. Thank you, Peter, for staying with us. Now, what's your reaction to the breaking news? What do you think we can speculate? What cards are Mexico having now or are going to play now?
Yeah, I think that's good news. You know, obviously, that's what President Trump is looking for to negotiate. And I think that, you know, Mexico responding in that way is opening the door for negotiations to get serious and probably reach an agreement before August 1st. So I think that's good news. Obviously, you know, a lot of things have to be ironed out, but I think both sides will take serious commitments to iron out a deal.
And Peter, building on that, Sheinbaum has expressed hope. Do you think she will hold another meeting? And do you think when do you think we can find out about the deal, the counter proposal deal that is to come out of Mexico?
Well, I think once negotiations start, you know, nothing is ever a secret, and so things will be made known to the public as they negotiate. And once both countries come to a term, then I think we'll have an agreement. It's very possible that it could happen, let's say, a couple of days before the deadline.
And what if they don't reach an agreement, Peter? Then what will happen between U.S. and Mexico?
Well, I think, like I said before, I'm hopeful that a deal will happen. And if it does, obviously, you know, we have to see the terms and, of course, how steep the tariffs are and what Mexico is going to, and how Mexico is going to retaliate. It takes two to tango, as you know. And so a deal will be worked out, I think, and we'll just have to wait and see what the terms are. Do I think that 30% is going to stick? No.
Thank you very much, Peter Cordillo, for joining us for this breaking news and sharing your insight. Now we move on to our next news. Thailand's Anti-Graft Commission will investigate suspended Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra for possible ethics breaches after a leaked phone call earlier with Cambodia's former leader Hun Sen. The call, recorded on June 15th, appeared to show Paetongtarn bowing to Hun Sen and criticizing a top Thai army commander, triggering public outrage and claims she had undermined Thailand's sovereignty amid a territorial dispute with Cambodia. Earlier this month, the Constitutional Court suspended her from duty over the same controversy. The scandal has sparked protests demanding her resignation and prompted her coalition's second largest party to pull out, leaving her government with a fragile majority. Now we move on to our next news. Israel's military said it carried out airstrikes targeting several tanks in southern Syria's Sueda province today, marking a dramatic escalation amid sectarian clashes in the region. The strikes occurred near Sami village, according to Israeli military spokesperson Avichai Adrai, who vowed to be continued in a message posted in Arabic on social media. The airstrikes came as violence between Sunni Bedouin tribes and Druze fighters raged on in Sueda, with at least 89 people killed, including 46 Druze combatants, 18 Bedouin fighters, 14 security forces, and civilians. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights have confirmed the death toll and warned that more could follow as fighting continues. The escalation coincides with Syria's attempts to stabilize the region amid a backdrop of rising communal tensions and strategic interventions by foreign powers. Now we move on to our next news. A devastating fire tore through the Gabriel House Assisted Living facility in Fall River, Massachusetts on Sunday night, killing at least 9 people and injuring dozens more, including 5 firefighters. The blaze, which started around 9:50 p.m. local time, escalated to a 5-alarm emergency, drawing about 50 firefighters to the scene, 30 of whom rushed in off duty. The facility housed approximately 70 elderly residents. Fire Chief Jeffrey Bacon said that rescue crews encountered intense heat and smoke while evacuating occupants. Some residents were pronounced dead on site, while at least 30 others, including the injured firefighters, were transported to local hospitals. Their conditions range from stable to critical. Officials called the incident an unfathomable tragedy, expressing deep condolences to the families and community members affected. The cause of the fire remains under investigation, with state and local authorities combining through the charred remains for clues. Now we move on to our next news. Australia has fired its first ever HIMARS long-range rocket on home soil, joining US and Singapore forces in a joint live-fire drill during the Talisman Sabre 2025 War Games. The HIMARS system, which can strike targets up to 400 kilometers away, was deployed at Shoalwater Bay in Queensland as part of a strategic effort to bolster defense in the Indo-Pacific. Up to 40,000 troops from 19 countries, including Japan, France, and South Korea, are participating in the massive military exercise spanning Australia's territories from the Indian Ocean to the Coral Sea. Australia is investing heavily in missile defense, including 74 billion Australian dollars over the next decade, and received its first HIMARS systems from Lockheed Martin earlier this year. Officials stressed the exercise is meant as a deterrent amid rising tensions over China's growing military presence in the region. Let's listen in to the Australian Army Director General on the drills.
That was the most complex combined live-fire exercise that we have undertaken in 11 iterations of Talisman Sabre 25. Just as importantly, today was the first time the Australian Army has live-fired our long-range multi-domain platforms, being the HIMARS, so it is a remarkable day. The HIMARS will be utilised in conjunction with a number of other weapons platforms, together with our regional partners, to ensure that we have a strategy denial that will allow for security, peace and stability within the Indo-Pacific.
Now we move on to our next news. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is expected to meet US President Donald Trump later this month during Trump's private visit to Scotland. According to Downing Street, while the trip is unofficial and not classified as a state visit, Starmer has accepted an invitation to hold informal talks with Trump while he's in the country. The White House has not confirmed the visit yet, but Trump owns 2 golf resorts in Scotland, including Turnberry and Trump International Golf Links. Officials say the meeting is expected to be private and without a formal agenda, focused primarily on maintaining channels of communication between the 2 political figures. Now we move on to our next news. Nigeria is in mourning following the death of former President Muhammadu Buhari at age 82. He died in London on July 13th while under medical care. Buhari made history in 2015 as Nigeria's first opposition candidate to win the presidency. He vowed to tackle corruption and insecurity, but faced growing criticism during his tenure. President Tinubu has declared national mourning with flags at half-staff. Buhari's body will be returned to Nigeria for burial. Now we stay in the region. Cameroon's 92-year-old president, Paul Biya, has announced he will seek an 8th term in the October 12th election. Biya, in power since 1982, is the world's oldest serving head of state. If re-elected, he could remain in office until the age 99. His health has been a source of speculation, with a 42-day disappearance last year sparking concern. While his party backs him, opponents argue his long rule has stalled diplomacy. 2 ex-allies have broken away to challenge him. Now we move on to our next news. Forest fires are ravaging a large area of woodland in Scrubland near Mostar in southern Bosnia. The flames have spread across mountainous terrain that is difficult to access, making firefighting efforts extremely challenging. The country is entering a new heat wave, with temperatures in Mostar expected to reach around 35 degrees Celsius in the coming days. Now we move back to Asia. 12 Hong Kong pro-democracy activists have appealed their subversion convictions and jail terms in a national security case that has spotlighted Beijing's ongoing crackdown on dissent and drawn international criticism. The appeal stems from the 47 Democrats case, named for the number of activists who were arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit subversion in 2021. The court eventually found 45 of the defendants guilty of organizing and holding an unofficial primary election in July 2020. This came soon after Beijing imposed a sweeping national security law in response to pro-democracy protests. The year before, 2 defendants were also acquitted. The prosecutors considered the action to be a plot to undermine the Hong Kong government. Some rights groups and countries have condemned the case as politically motivated and called for the release of the Democrats who were sentenced last November to prison terms of between 4 and 10 years. Now we move on to our next news. Malaysia has imposed an immediate restriction on the export, transshipment and transit of high-performance US-made AI chips, acquiring a strategic trade permit. The move aims to curb illegal diversions, especially to countries like China, amid growing concerns from Washington Malaysia's Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry said this action will close regulatory loopholes while the country evaluates adding such chips to its strategic items list. The country's strategic location and logistics capabilities make it a key player in global semiconductor transits. The clampdown follows reports that Chinese firms may have used Malaysian data centers to bypass U.S. chip curbs. Malaysia reaffirmed its commitment to halting any illicit trade activities. Now we move on to our next news. US President Donald Trump attended the FIFA Club World Cup final between Chelsea and PSG at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey on Sunday. He praised FIFA President Gianni Infantino for his efforts in growing soccer globally. Trump described the match as a great game and highlighted the sport's growing popularity. He also recalled watching legendary player Pele in the 1970s. Chelsea triumphed 3-0 with Cole Palmer shining in the first half. Trump later presented the trophy to Chelsea, calling the victory an impressive moment. The match was packed with fans reflecting the sport's expanding appeal. Now let's take a look at some stories from the world of business. The crypto industry is poised for a breakthrough as lawmakers in the U.S. House advance several industry-backed bills during what Republicans are calling Crypto Week. The most crucial bill aims to establish a regulatory framework for stablecoins and may soon head to President Trump's desk. Industry experts say this could unlock fresh capital and push digital assets further into mainstream finance. China's exports jumped 5.8% in June, outpacing forecasts as companies raced to fulfill orders ahead of a potential tariff hike from US next month. The spike comes amid a fragile truce between Beijing and Washington, with businesses rushing to avoid supply chain disruptions. Export to Southeast Asia saw strong growth as Chinese firms shift focus to nearby markets amid weak domestic demand and US uncertainty. South Korea is preparing to order all domestic airlines operating Boeing jets to inspect fuel switches, following new scrutiny after the deadly Air India crash that killed 260 people. The move comes after a 2018 FAA advisory was cited in a preliminary crash report, highlighting concerns over fuel switch locks. Seoul says the checks are precautionary, though no timeline has been given. Elon Musk says he does not support a merger between Tesla and his AI startup xAI, which owns the Grok chatbot. Responding to a user on X, Musk replied no when asked if the two companies should merge. This comes a day after Musk said he would seek a shareholder vote on whether Tesla should invest in xAI, a move he had earlier described as desirable. Wall Street futures edged lower on Monday after President Donald Trump threatened fresh 30% tariffs on imports from the European Union and Mexico, set to begin on August 1st. The surprise move has rattled investor confidence ahead of a busy week filled with key economic data and second quarter earnings. Trump also warned other nations to strike trade deals quickly or face similar penalties. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.